Good morning, everybody, or afternoon if you're on the East Coast, or midnight if you're somewhere in Australia, or if you're from another planet. I don't know how to say anything. So, hello. I just gave you, Morgan, the co-host capabilities, so you can start getting ready. And we have about a minute before the time slot begins, so more people, I'm sure, are on their way. Give folks another minute or two. They might be hopping from another meeting. I know I am in meetings and workshops and other fun Zoom events. I think I will create a new superhero called Mr. Zoom, and it will just be somebody who sits in front of a computer all day and survives. So that will be the trick.
So you need like a big kind of Z, like right here?
That will be me falling asleep, and the cartoon Z will be right. the text going in my thought balloon. All right, well, it is 10 o'clock Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, and we are so pleased to have Morgan Gresham here to do a half-hour workshop on getting ready to implement ePortfolios in the fall. Before we begin, it's already recording. I don't even have to click the button. Look at that. I wanted to make sure that we were capturing this because we know some of our colleagues are still asleep or busy with other meetings, and so we will include them in spirit and make sure that they get to have access to the recording. So Morgan, I really would love to hand it over to you, but first, Helen or Tracy, would you like to do any announcements? I know we have some exciting information about Slack and Shark Tanks and other things that start with S.
Tracy, do you want to go ahead or do you want to...
I was waiting for you to go ahead.
We're very coordinated this morning.
We so are. Well, I just want to say welcome everyone and so glad to see you all here. And yeah, I'll turn it over to Helen to share all the exciting stuff. I can also tell you that we've got some good things happening next week. I've been doing recordings of conversations for our kickoff sessions, and then we've got some great workshops lined up for next week as well. So hopefully some of you will be able to join us again.
Great, thanks Tracy. Yeah, so just wanted to highlight two things that we've launched this week. First of all is the Slack workspace. We have about like probably about 20, 30 people online. I know Robin, John, Deborah are all up there. And so some really active conversations, especially most recently around people offering examples of student ePortfolios from various fields. So I'll go ahead and pop the link to the invitation to join the Slack workplace into the chat so that you can get a sense for, please join us. It's an opportunity for us to interact while we're not actually in sessions. The second thing that we'll be launching later today is the Shark Tank concept. So Shark Tank ePortfolio edition, we're really excited about that. We're in the process of lining up our sharks to be able to give feedback to individuals who might have a new idea or something they might want to try in the fall. We're encouraging if you met someone during the conference and would like to partner with them to propose an idea, this is your opportunity to get some feedback and some advice from some portfolio experts in the field. It's actually intended to be very simple, one slide that you can use, plus then a live 3-minute pitch, pitching your idea, and then you'll get some questions and advice and so on. So we're really excited about that. And again, we'll be sharing some more information later today.
Great. Morgan, take it away.
Wait, one last thing. The most important thing about the Shark Tank is there's prizes. So you definitely want to get in on putting your pitch in.
Prizes are always fun. So hi everybody, my name is Morgan Gresham. I am at the University of South Florida, St. Petersburg, and in just 1 second, I am going to try to share my screen again, and I have a couple of slides, but really my goal here is to have an interactive conversation. So if I can share the slides, great. If not, we will just talk around the ideas. One thing I can do is go ahead and grab the URL for the slides so that you can actually click on them and have them available to you if I can't get this thing to work, because you know sometimes technology is that way. I have been teaching with portfolios since 1991, which is hard to believe now, and I am always intrigued by the various ways that they change for us. So let me see if I can get this to presentation mode. And I am going to ask everyone if you could give me a thumbs up or a yes if you are able to see the slides. Excellent. And the fun things that are always happening with technology, it's taking a minute for me to be able to see my own slides, but here we go. So 2020 has been a little different, sometimes a little confusing, sometimes a little stressful, sometimes a little bit of all of the above. In the middle of having to switch over to remote learning, my institution has been consolidating with 2 other campuses. And so one of the things that we have been doing as portfolios, and now we are going to be learning new ways of doing portfolios and trying to figure out what a portfolio looks like in this new world. And so one of the things that I wanted to have the opportunity, and one of the reasons I said yes to this workshop, is to be able to talk through with other folks about why portfolios, why do we keep coming back to portfolios? What can we do now that things are a little bit different? So I'd like to hear from each of you who are here, why you are here today and what it is that you're hoping to get out of this conversation so that I can sort of help steer us in the way that we would like to go for this conversation. So if you would, you can unmute yourself and say hi and why you're here and what you hope to get from this.
Well, I know I have been using ePortfolios with my students. I teach undergraduate general education courses, and helping light up the runway, make connections to the other work that they're doing across their academic and bridge to career work. I'm just interested in finding ways to engage them and thinking of this as more than just assignments for my class.
Thanks. Other folks?
I really appreciate where you've started with us, Morgan, in terms of this, just that basic fundamental question, why portfolios? And maybe why now, or why especially now? Because I think even for those of us who've been doing portfolios for a long time, is there something different about this time, especially since everything's online? I saw that John had unmuted, so I'm gonna go ahead and turn, throw the ball, imaginary ball over to him.
Thank you for that. I'm teaching a department that has been trying to develop an integrated approach to musicianship for about 10 years. And we've been collecting various types of artifacts ad hoc and not really connecting them at all. And it just seemed like the next logical step would be to do that intentionally and to try to work with anything. And so we have a curriculum revision in progress that I'm kind of driving. And I thought this would be the perfect time to try to fold that in and just take all the stuff that we've basically been doing and just give it a little bit more teeth in terms of the organization. So I do plan to do the Shark Tank.
Great.
Other folks? I think we've heard from just about everybody, but I just want to make sure.
I haven't spoken yet. I am Debbie. I am in Anchorage, Alaska. I am trying to do something a little bit different with my Art of Mathematics class. It's a course for humanities majors that satisfies their general ed requirement. And we've always done a project on contemporary mathematicians and had a poster session, which obviously is not going to happen this fall because we're all online. So I'm looking for something that they can do that's meaningful and that they can share with one another, but they don't have to be in one physical spot. So ideas about how to do that well would be great.
Excellent.
Hi, this is Rob, and I'm apologize. I'm in a very noisy spot. I just want to say I'm listening much more than participating, but I'm here for many reasons, so I apologize about the noise.
It's one of our new normals, right? That, you know, you never know who's going to pop in. I have a cat that I am sure is going to appear on my screen at any moment. My kids are often going to walk in, and, you know, having to figure out how we're going to do this in this kind of a space is what we are all about at this point. One of the things that I think has been particularly interesting to me, like I said, I've been doing portfolios for a while now, is even though my students who were fairly technologically savvy in the middle of the spring semester and had been working on portfolios for a while, suddenly had this fear of putting themselves in that portfolio space in the spring semester because things were suddenly so different. And so one of the things that I want to try to think about and brainstorm with you all is how do we help our students become comfortable in the space of the ePortfolio when they have so many other changes and challenges that are going on with them. One of the things that I do try to help my students think about is, you know, what is an ePortfolio? Why are we doing that? And so just a very basic definition that you all have probably seen before. It is a collection of works in an electronic environment that showcases learning over time. And the thing that I kept emphasizing with my students over the spring semester is learning over time. That was the piece that they were struggling with the most since we were in this different environment. And I want to make sure that as I continue to move forward, that's the key piece that I keep bringing back to my students, that it's learning over time, that not everything is going to be perfect, and that I'm really interested in the learning portfolio. We can do a showcase portfolio, and John, it sounded like one of the things that you were trying to do with your portfolios was do that showcase portfolio that really sort of helps students do that integrative piece. But I think also having an opportunity to remind them that not everything is going to be perfect in that space is really important. One of the things that I do share with my students is, what are you trying to do with your portfolio? What did you learn? How did you learn it? Why is it important? And what will you do because of that thing that you have learned? And I think that that was a key piece of the work that my students were trying to do, is to show themselves from the very beginning of the semester to the end of the semester and making those reflective statements. Just a couple of other pieces, what might go into a portfolio: everything or nothing, really depending on your level of familiarity with different kinds of technologies, the students' level of familiarity with different kinds of technologies. One of the things that has been apparent to me is the more freedom I can give my students with a portfolio, the more they bring to it. And so one of the things that I have been doing, I'm in a small program. I teach first year composition and writing studies courses, and our students come to us with not many technology skills, and we really are trying to say, how can we do this kind of ePortfolio work with very limited technologies? Our students do bring their own laptops, so you never know what it is that they're going to have available to them to do this work. And so we have been using Google Sites as our portfolio manager. And the first day of class in my first year writing classes, we create that Google Site portfolio. And then every time we come into class, we build into that portfolio. That has been successful for us, but clearly it's not the only way to do this. But it is one of those kinds of commonplace tools that help students see this is something I can already have access to, and I can build in any of the materials that I'm working on for class into that portfolio. What else goes into a portfolio? All of the different kinds of things that students might be doing if it is one of those integrative portfolios. Reflections and evaluations are the other two key pieces that I see as super valuable to an ePortfolio. And then I really did just want to open this out for conversation with everyone. I know it's a little harder when we are in this online environment, and it's hard to be able to make eye contact and say, I'm ready to talk. But I really do want to have that kind of give and take with a conversation. So I wanted to hear from you. What are your goals? What are the issues that you've been sort of struggling with to be able to make this happen, especially for fall 2020? What are the particular situations? Are there concerns about platforms? Are there concerns about students, nuts and bolts, tips and tricks? Any of those things that we would like to talk about in the space that we have available to us. So I'm going to stop talking for a minute and see what other folks want to talk about.
Well, I am interested, that last question you ask in the reflections, what will you do because of what you learned? And I'm really interested in that now as we help students prepare for not just their academic careers, but life in the COVID era. And so I'm interested in hearing how others are feeling about the assignments that they create so that there's a kind of a real world context around them. I love Debbie's idea of contemporary mathematicians and having students make connections to people who are doing work in the space. And so, but I'm just interested in hearing how people are making that link between what we're asking students to project about what they've learned and how they're going to use it in the future with the world being so different these days.
And Kevin, maybe adding to that, what are we going to do to help them to kind of do things differently and leverage the learning that they're experiencing in all different contexts? And it sort of ties in with one of the kickoff conversations for next week around employers and, you know, sort of new calls for students to document what it is they're able to do. And portfolios are so perfectly positioned for that. But I think it means that we're going to have to do some work with the students to help them to really be able to articulate what they're going to do and how do we scaffold that for them along the way.
So Morgan, question for you in terms of, you mentioned that much of your work is around, you know, is around the process and it's really integrated into your class where every class session, there is an opportunity to work on the portfolio or create artifacts or evidence for the portfolio. In terms of, and maybe this also relates to Robin's question about how can deep reflections be encouraged, especially in a voluntary portfolio initiative, and then kind of circling back to what Tracy mentioned for next week's conversation that we posted about employers, that opportunity to, you know, practice that translation, right? Like on one hand, like I'm creating this I'm doing this in my class, I'm showing my growth over time. But if now I'm thinking about the showcase, I'm thinking about LinkedIn, I'm thinking about of my experiences, how do I now represent it to an employer audience for this, you know, for that purpose of wanting to highlight what I know and what I can do. How does that, you know, how and where and when are students, you know, prompted to be able to practice that?
I think that those are really important questions, and that one of the things that for me is something that I try to privilege with my students is that we're always reflecting and that we always have these opportunities to interact with the class in some way. And so what I have up on the screen is that sort of moment of how can I be thinking about my students or with my students about those opportunities when they're not right there in the classroom with me. So if they are engaging with class material, waiting on the bus, what tool or opportunity can I give them that they could do, for example, a 30-second video that they can add into their portfolio. So one of the things that I would say that I try to do with my students is give them this whole range of possibilities of artifacts that could go into the portfolio, and we spend a huge chunk of time putting those things into the portfolio. But then at the end of the semester or at the end of their 2-year program, they have to start making those choices about who's the audience for this particular portfolio and which way are they going to represent themselves for the portfolio. And I think those are absolutely key questions that no matter which way that they are going to build their portfolio, they're ultimately in charge of the portfolio and that they are responsible for the materials that go into the portfolio, but we have to help them as educators understand what some of those possibilities may be. So if they are taking their portfolio as a showcase portfolio to say, help me get a job, then they may not want to have some of those developmental pieces in that showcase portfolio. And we need to have some strategies or some questions that we would be able to provide those students to say, why am I putting this in the portfolio? How am I going to share this information? How am I going to contextualize this information for the people who haven't been in that particular class with me for the past 16 weeks, so that they understand that this piece of writing, for example, or this piece of video was my very beginning learner piece of work and not the end product that would come from this. And so creating those questions that say both, how can we ask students to be reflective across this time space and try to incorporate those pieces into the portfolio? And then how do we help them make judgments about which things to include in whichever application of the portfolio they are going to do? And I think that that is particularly important when we're thinking about those real world applications where they are going to take their portfolio to a potential employer and say, I'm capable of these things. Look at my video editing, look at my reflection, and making sure that students are starting to ask their own questions about why they might incorporate something into their portfolio.
Yeah, thank you. I think what you've highlighted and pointed to is that curation piece, and then and also when you thinking about audience, knowing your audience and what are their needs, and then how does that guide then what you decide to showcase.
Absolutely. And I think that one of the things that is essential in this process is letting students know that that too is a process, and that the sooner we can, as thinking about this situated in a class situation, but recognizing that they will probably be moving that portfolio along with them into other classes or into other spaces, that we can provide them short questions in the very early stages. What is this? Why might I want to incorporate this into my portfolio? That they can continue to do those questions throughout that whole process, so that when they're coming to the end of that portfolio creation, they've been thinking about this all along, and they have that strength or that scaffolding to be able to say, I've got all of the things for this audience, but I can shift it for this audience or for this purpose as I need to.
Morgan, do you ever engage them in activity? As you were speaking there, I was thinking, oh, a neat activity might be to have them say, take an artifact and shift it in the context of your class. Do you ever have them do that, like as they're building, so they kind of get some practice with that?
Absolutely. I am very fortunate to be able to spend a lot of my writing class time doing that kind of work. So we will identify a product that we are going to try to make, and we will build that product. And then I will ask students, I use a project title called remediation, and I ask them to take that project and remediate it into something else. And they mostly I'm teaching digital writing, and so I have that opportunity to say, if it was alphabetic text, turn it into a video. If you use mostly sound, then let's use images. And so having that opportunity to really start to shift that is something that I have the opportunity to really sort of focus in on. But I recognize that not everybody has that opportunity in their classes when there's a lot of different kinds of content. But providing students with some questions, and I have a heuristic that talks about critical thinking in terms of the kinds of work that you might incorporate into a portfolio, and I'll share that at the end of this in the chat session. So what we can do is say, here are some questions that you may want to consider, and have students do individual writing pieces outside of class with regard to the artifact that they are going to be putting in their portfolio. It's something that they don't necessarily have to turn in for a grade. It's something that they don't necessarily have to show to the instructor. They can share that with another student in the class, or they can just have that be something that you repeat. So it's like a journal, or a journal writing, and that then they are able to start to do that work without it having to take up a large amount of the class time, because I know that class time can be a priority, especially when you have a really heavy content that you're trying to work on.
Thanks. It's a great ideas. I'm loving, and I can't wait to see the heuristic.
It's one of those things that you find that there are so many different kinds of questions that students can ask themselves about what to do with the portfolio artifact. And so it's nice to see that this one is in a chart, and it gives you what is it you're trying to do, and here are the questions as a student that you might want to ask with that particular artifact. So I'm happy to share that. I found it somewhere, and it has been one of those things that I keep coming back to.
Yeah, and we can add that to the gallery for the week.
Absolutely. So I feel like there are probably some unasked questions at this point in terms of particular situations, and I would love to be able to sort of push in on some of those questions and say, how can we help solve this particular problem for the fall? Because I know that there are lots of different kinds of things that are happening for and to us as we plan for fall.
Well, Sophie in the chat is looking for ways to use ePortfolios more consistently since they're planning on being online in the fall, and she is in Egypt where she works with learners of English.
So I want to give an opportunity to other folks to try to chime in on some ideas. So I'm going to practice my wait time for a minute, but if somebody wants to chime in, that would be great.
Sophie, if you have a microphone, feel free to chime in and add to what you put in the chat.
Use ePortfolios for students to document some actions that we have in the activities in class, but we have some difficulty with that because students have situations, and very often before we ask them to reflect on their learning, so they will say, well, before I didn't know how to read, and now I do know how to read. So after that, you have to reflect on it. But there's only so many activities that you have to do. So we have them ePortfolio as a means for assessment, really, since we can't have exams anymore. We used to rely quite heavily on tests and writing exams.
Sophie, it was a little bit hard to hear everything you said. It broke up a little bit, but the things that I was able to glean from your questions and statements is that we're heading into the fall. You may need to focus on the ePortfolio as a way to conduct assessments because exams are not going to be possible in the same way that you conducted them in the past, and that you're looking for strategies to do that where it's meaningful to the students. Is that a reasonable summary of your question? Okay, yes, exactly. So maybe Morgan, if you can respond to that a little bit.
Absolutely. So one of the things that has been very useful for our composition program, we've had ePortfolios for a while now, but we have not had a mandate in terms of how to use those ePortfolios or how to assess those ePortfolios. And so one of the things that we have done as a faculty is get together on a semi-regular basis to talk about individually what we would like to see with portfolios, and that's how we generated what we were looking for in terms of our assessment process. So we started with a basic idea. We want our students to be able to show or demonstrate this kind of work, and so in our particular case it was the kind of work of writing, and so we wanted to be able to ask students to show that they were able to do particularly alphabetic text. We wanted them to be able to show some facility with video, and we wanted them to be able to show some facility with modality. And so that, pretty broad in terms of what we were looking for. And then we would start to assemble our students' work. And so we would bring that together and we would say, how well does this showcase what it is that we would like our students to be able to do? And in that particular moment, then we're talking about a very localized context. We're talking about a group of instructors who are talking together about the kinds of things that they want their students to be able to do. And then we were able to use that information to assemble sort of a rubric for our assessment processes. From that point, we were able to share that with students, and so we would pull from those portfolios. Here's an example of a student's work that they have done XYZ really well, and I think that that has really been helpful for us in terms of being able to show our students what other students in the same program have been capable of and the kinds of work that we're really looking for. And it gives us that opportunity to have a diversity of experiences with our students that are really important, because like I mentioned earlier, our students have very different technologies that they are bringing into the classroom. And so we can't have set expectations. Everybody's going to produce this kind of video with this level of editing to it. And so we're able to say, here are the positive qualities in these particular kinds of work that we are looking for.
That's really useful. And I see that Tracy has put some links in the chat for you, Sophie, for the value rubrics by AACNU. The value rubrics are meta rubrics that were constructed by a group of people that went around the country and evaluated rubrics that different institutions were using to kind of make a best of the best. Or what do they call it? Best of breed. So they have them for integrative thinking and for creative thinking and for writing and for communication. So you probably will be able to find either one full rubric that will support your needs or pieces of different rubrics. And I really like how those value rubrics, they're meant to be scored thinking of how far along students are in their academic journey. So a 1, a 2, a 3, and a 4 represents, yeah, they are probably in their first year of studies and should be at a lower level because they haven't done as much work at a critical level that they wouldn't have experienced in schools before post-secondary education. So hopefully those will be helpful. I know we have reached the half-hour mark. Since we started a little bit late, I wanted to give us a couple extra minutes, but I would love to at first ask everybody to use your reactions with clapping or thumbs up or the chat to thank Morgan for leading us in a discussion. I really appreciate that. It was engaging and not just a sit and listen experience. I think we all appreciate the ability to engage with one another. I will encourage you all to come back in just 26 minutes. It'll be a different Zoom room, but we'll be talking to Jerry Hanley, the head of Merlot, an international experience. If you're not familiar with Merlot, it's not just a wine, it's also the multimedia for educational resources and learning objects for teaching, I think is what it stands for. MERLOTMOUSE. And so then we have, after that, at 12 noon Pacific, we will have the Digital Ethics Task Force that AAEEBL has been so lucky to have work for an entire year on putting together some principles that we can all put into use on our campuses. Those principles are undergirded by examples of what it might look like, scenarios, as well as strategies. And they span from things for instructors, for students, for us as professional developers, and for even vendors. And so it's a chock full day. So I recommend if you're on the West Coast, go get some more caffeine. If you're on the East Coast, go get some lunch. And we'll see you all back here in 25 minutes. In a different room. So go back to the AAEEBL Week 2 event webs page and click on the next link in the series. If there's any other questions, we've got Tracy and Helen who know a lot more than I do, and they can answer them.
Thanks, everyone. It was good to see you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Morgan. That was
Thanks
terrific.
so much.
Morgan. John Turner will have to explain 10Q sometime to me. Okay, I'm going to stop the recording, but I'm not going to leave.